What's up, everybody? I'm Dr. Steven Schlintz, and I want to welcome you to Dental Practice Freedom Radio.
So here's the real question. How do dentists like you, who aren't willing to let insurance dictate how you will run your practice, who want to create incredibly profitable practices without sacrificing your time or sanity, how do you create the strategies to ensure your practice not only survives, but thrives in the 21st century? That's the blaring question, and Dr. Steve Schlintz is here to provide the answers. Welcome to Dental Practice Freedom Radio.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Dr. Steve Schlintz. I want to welcome you back to another exciting episode of Dental Practice Freedom Radio. What I wanted to talk about is mentorship. And so I think I promised last time that I was on the podcast I was going to talk about mentorship next. So I'm a man of my word. And, I think it's really, really important, especially now in probably the 21st century, more than at any other point in time, that us as dentists, we really have to understand so many different facets of our business. And so if you're an associate, you still have to understand the business aspect of it. If you're a practice owner, it is so important for you to understand all the different features. It's just interesting. I haven't been in my practice as much now as I've been doing more coaching and consulting, but I'll come back into the practice. I've been about a day and a half a week, and probably getting down to a day a week pretty consistently now. And I was just thinking about all of the mentors that had helped me along the way to get me to this point, and also how in order for me to go to the next level, I have to go from being mentored to being a mentor, right? One of my mentors that I had been introduced to last year by the name of Russell Brunson talked about this difference between growth and contribution. And so for the first 3 or 4 years in practice, I was in a rapid growth mode from a learning standpoint and then also an implementing standpoint. And what I had found was my practice was increasing in profitability by 20% a year, and I was doing actually less dentistry. I was just making more profit doing it. And I was just looking at the numbers actually, and it was absolutely staggering. That's what I wanted to say. Sorry. But the reality was I knew that there was something more. I wanted to be able to contribute. And I knew for me to go to the next level of my own evolution and then ultimately to be able to help others, I had to start to contribute. Now, what's really interesting is when you start to contribute, you actually go back and learn things that you had probably already learned, but you just forgot or you didn't know how to utilize from your previous mentors. And it's kind of like if you're a coach, right? So, when I was in high school, I played quarterback. I was a quarterback of my high school football team up until my senior year. And then I played linebacker. But what was interesting is quarterback is always still, one of those positions that I just, if you ever watch a football game, that's the first position I'm looking at. And studying that part, once you're a quarterback, you're always going to be a quarterback at some level. But I started to coach just a little bit, and then I would teach other people how to throw a football. And what was interesting was when I started to do that, I understood my own passing skills a lot differently. I'd say, well, you gotta rotate your arm through, and you gotta have your elbow pointed this direction and X, Y, and Z, right? When you're doing that, what you're actually finding is here's why these things actually work. So you could be an unconscious competent in your own practice. Things might just be working for you. And you said, what would I need a mentor for? You're always going to need a mentor to continue to grow and develop. That's an absolute given. If you don't have a coach at some level, I'm not saying I need to be your coach or anything like that. Maybe this podcast is what you need. But the reality is you always are going to need a coach or a mentor at every step in your life. And if you don't have one, you're stagnant, right? Now, you don't have to have a physical coach. You don't have to be talking to them, but you got to be learning from somebody. You got to be developing some skill to continue to grow and develop. But it's your responsibility at some point when you start to develop all these skills to contribute to others. But you can do it. I know this sounds terrible. You can do it selfishly. Because what I discovered is when I started to contribute to others, that's when my own growth completely shot through the roof. It's one of the reasons that I actually started this podcast is it helps me understand some of the things that I'm seeing in dentistry on a whole other level, because you, the listener, can come back to me and say, hey, I really want you to elaborate on this. I wasn't quite sure what you meant by that, right? And you can go to the Facebook page and you can start to interact at that level. And that's what I want this podcast and this group to be about. So when you get a mentor, you want to dig into everything that that person has. You want to learn everything that you can. And then you get to a certain point at which you just can't learn anything more from that mentor. And then you go on to the next mentor and you learn everything you can from there. But here's the deal. At some point, you have to switch from being in growth mode to contribution mode. And when you make that switch, it's a difficult switch. I will be honest and tell you that it's not. For me, for example, having an associate in my practice, like he does a phenomenal job, but it's not natural for me to actually mentor at that level, right? I'm very impatient. I know that about myself. And that's a personality trait and a characteristic that I'm always trying to improve, because the reality is if I'm impatient, it doesn't serve the practice, it doesn't serve my patients, it doesn't serve my team, it doesn't serve me, and it doesn't serve my associate, right? I have to start to understand myself better so that I can be a better mentor to him, so I can contribute more and then ultimately have me grow as well. So when you start to look at your mentors, I want you to be thinking about, who am I learning this information from? What am I getting out of this information? And then how can I start to switch to a contribution mode even while I'm learning and growing? It's like it's almost, you're at I don't know, maybe like a traffic light or something, and it's switching. So, or a railway signal, you know how like it goes left and right, left and right, left and right. You want to be always between the growth and contribution, growth and contribution, growth and contribution. So you're always doing both at the same time, but you're growing and then you're contributing. You're growing and then contributing. What I have found to be one of the most effective things that I have done to start to utilize principles is actually, I think it was Richard Feynman, the physicist. He had a Feynman technique. And so what he would do is he would learn all this information, and then he would try to distill it into its absolute essence and then teach it to somebody else so that they could understand it. Because until you can teach it to somebody else that they can understand, you yourself don't understand the information. And one of my mentors, Bob Proctor, it's funny that all these mentors are coming out, but one of my mentors, Bob Proctor, talked about that. And I said, wow, that is so true. That is so true. If you don't, you can intellectually comprehend something. But if you try to teach it to somebody else, the words don't come out. You don't know how to explain it the right way. It means you're lacking understanding in that concept. And when you start to contribute, you will find that there will be certain areas that you actually lack an understanding. So when you start to think about this in your own practice, what am I meaning here? Do you have to bring on an associate just to contribute? No. Let's say you start to contribute with your team. You're going to go from growth mode to be able to contribute to your team, because you know the more successful your team is and the more your team grows, the more successful your practice and you are going to be. So contribution is very important to the team. So if you learn something really important from a book, don't give them a book and say, go read this. They're not going to probably do that. They might. It depends on the team. I know some teams that do that. But, if I gave a book to my team, one person would read it. And I know who that person would be. And then the other three would not read it. It's just a fact. So you want to think, how could I take this information and then be able to contribute and help them grow by distilling what it is I know in a way that they can understand? And if you started doing that with everything that you're learning, your learning process would speed up tremendously, right? It's one of the reasons that when I was in undergrad, I went and became an organic chemistry tutor. I just wanted to learn the information more. I actually loved organic chemistry. I was probably one of the weird guys on planet Earth that loved organic chemistry. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I would actually have done that. I probably would have went into organic chemistry if I didn't have a summer internship where I actually had to work in the lab. And I hated that part, right? I just knew that wasn't for me. So I loved the intellectual part of it, but I hated the lab part of it. Absolutely hated it. So you want to be thinking about this all the time. Who are the mentors in your life? Who has profoundly impacted your life? What did they teach you? Because they taught you something that impacted your life. And then the next question should be, how do I take that information and contribute to others so I can enrich their lives, and in so doing, enrich my own life so that I can have a more thriving practice, a more thriving life, a more thriving relationships, all of the things that come with growth and contribution. I want you to be thinking about that. Am I just growing, or am I growing and contributing? And the answer to that question is going to dictate everything that comes into your practice and your life in 2018. So hopefully you take this message to heart. Think about the mentors that you've had. Maybe say thank you to them. I mean, I do that all the time. And I think it's so, I try to live in a state of gratitude as much as possible, where I'm always thanking the people that helped me get where I wanted to go and were unselfish and contributed, because I know how important that is. And then I'll leave you with this good story. And I want you to think about this, because maybe he's listening right now. And I want to thank him for doing this. So there was a time, it was about 3 years ago, 3.5, maybe 4 now. Gosh, it's been so long. I was at Spear Education, and I just started to dig into the clinical aspects. And I was actually at the Schuster Center at the time. And I met Gary DeWood. And I was talking to Gary at the actual workshop itself, and he knew a little bit about me, but it was just a very casual conversation. And so, nothing against, it's just a superficial conversation. Where are you from? Yada, yada, yada. I mean, there's hundreds of dentists there for maybe the workshop was 30, but there's still a lot of dentists there, right? So I've somehow got this courage to say, hey, I really want to pick his brain, because I want to build this relationship-based practice. And what he was talking about at the workshop resonated so much, because he had Pankey influence, and how do you take care of a patient? How do you build a relationship? And so I asked him, I said, would it be okay? I would love to go to dinner with you. I'd love to take you to dinner. And he said, yeah, I'd love to do that. And that was via email. And I can remember like it was yesterday, I was so pumped. I was like, this is like a giant in dentistry. I'm going to be able to pick his brain for an hour and just ask him a bunch of questions. I was so excited to do this. And I remember him saying something at that dinner. It was, I think we were at 131 Main or something like that. And I remember him telling me, there's going to be a point in time in your life where there's going to be a young doctor that's going to want to pick your brain. Just do me a huge favor, and when they ask you, go ahead and say, yeah, absolutely, I'd love to do that. And I think about that all the time, and I actually had a situation happen that was very similar to that. And I remember that conversation that I had, and I said, of course, I'd love to, hey, let's get together and talk about whatever it is you want to talk about, and I'd be happy to help you any way that I can. Think about how you can impact others' lives. Your experiences in your practice will be able to help somebody else get where they want to go. I 100% can guarantee it. We try to poo-poo what it is we do and say, oh, nobody wants to listen to me, or X, Y, and Z. And, for example, this podcast, for a long time, I didn't want to do it because I'm like, who's going to listen to me, right? I had to test out these methods, and I had to figure out what works in a relationship-based practice and what doesn't work, and how can I do this, and how can I do this, and what's holding me back from here, and who's going to want to listen to me. Me documenting my journey and my story, I can guarantee you, hopefully if you're listening to this, you're going to be able to put yourself into my place, and you're going to be able to see parts of what's going on for you right now in my stories, so that hopefully this can help you get where you want to go. And so it's my small way of contributing, so that that we're all in this together, right? If you're listening to this podcast, we're in it together. And I want you to go thank one mentor that you had or have. Just say, thank you so much for what you do for me. It's indescribable how you've impacted my life. Just say that to them and see what happens. So hopefully you have a great day or night whenever you're listening to this, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode on Dental Practice Freedom Radio with Dr. Steve Schlintz. We'll see you on the next episode.